Nothing changes until you do this. Have you ever looked around and felt like your life was buffering? Like the loading bar is stuck at 87% and you've been staring at the screen for what seems like years. You're doing okay. You are functioning. You are surviving. But deep down, something is wrong. Not broken. Not a catastrophe. Just got stuck. That stuckness is a quiet form of suffering. It does not scream. It sighs. It appears in your routines. Your eyes glaze over during conversations. You keep checking your phone, hoping that something exciting will fall into your lap. However, nothing changes. Nothing ever changes. And it's not life's fault. It is yours. Now, hold on. Do not click off. This is not a self-blame guilt trip. In fact, it's the complete opposite. What I mean is that the moment when you feel stuck but strangely responsible is not a sign of weakness. That is awareness. That is the spark. Most people go through their lives half asleep, blaming the world, their parents, the government, their boss, or Mercury in retrograde. You notice that the loading bar has not moved. That alone places you ahead of 95% of the population. But here's the kicker. Noticing is not enough. Awareness without action is simply a loop. A mental hamster wheel disguised as insight. You'll watch self-help videos, buy a new journal, try meditation for a few days, and then you'll be right back where you started. Not because you're lazy, but because nothing changes until you do something real. That thing isn't always large or dramatic. It is not about quitting your job, moving to Bali, or taking an ice bath while chanting affirmations. But hey, you do you. Sometimes it is subtle. It's a single internal switch. One decision: stop negotiating with the part of yourself that is afraid of discomfort. Growth does not feel like fireworks. It feels like finally showing up to your own life and saying, okay, we're doing this. No more waiting for motivation. No more looking for the ideal moment. You create the moment, even if your hands shake while doing so. You do not need a 30-step plan to get started. You only need one moment to stop outsourcing your change to the universe, your horoscope, or the next YouTube video. This is the moment. Stay with me because I'm about to show you the actual switch that quietly changes everything without screaming for attention. The majority of people get this wrong. They believe that change must feel like a massive, high-voltage event. Something cinematic. You know, new year, new me, energy, big declarations, gym memberships, deleting half your contacts, cutting your hair, or ditching your ex. And while dramatic moments may feel like change, they are usually just noise. Real change? It is so quiet that it is almost boring. It's in the unseen moments. For example, you may decide not to respond to something that would have triggered you last week. Or when you resist the desire to explain yourself because, for once, your peace is more important than being understood. It is when you sit in the discomfort of not being numbed by your usual distractions. Food, your phone, and people's opinions. Instead, you feel what you are feeling. Not analyze it. Not spiritualize it. Simply sit with it. That is change. That is progress. And it does not feel like a dopamine rush. It feels like cleaning a wound. Necessary, uncomfortable, but healing. And here's something wild that most people don't realize. Change seldom announces itself. You don't wake up one day glowing and levitating with complete clarity. Sometimes the most profound changes seem insignificant until you look back and realize, whoa, I don't react the way I used to. You stopped chasing people who refused to cross the street for you. You stopped entertaining thoughts that used to take up space in your mind for free. You stopped saying yes simply to avoid awkwardness. And you didn't complete it all in one day. You simply stopped participating in your own suffering, one small moment at a time. That is the stuff that moves the needle. That is what truly creates a different life. Not the flashy stuff, but the small, consistent instances in which you chose to respond differently. Even when no one was watching, you know. No, I must be the only one. Here's the best part. These small shifts add up. They begin to change what you tolerate, what you attract, and how you perceive the world. They make you less reactive, more grounded, and significantly more difficult to manipulate, which is a very appealing energy to carry. This is not about achieving perfection. It's about becoming aware and then taking action with that awareness. Not later, not next week, but now. But here is the tricky part that most people don't see coming. As soon as you begin to change, your environment will begin to resist you. People don't talk about it enough. You start standing up straighter, setting better boundaries, and caring less about trivial matters. Suddenly, others act as if you broke some kind of silent contract. A friend might say, "You've changed," but not as a compliment. More like an accusation. In that moment, the temptation to revert to your former self is strong. Why? Because humans are designed for comfort, not transformation. And guess what? People are uncomfortable when they see you as different. Not because you are doing anything wrong, but because your change gently reveals where they are still stuck. And this does not always sit well. So you'll hear things like, "You used to be more fun. Why have you been so distant lately?" Or the classic, "You're acting superior to us." No, you aren't acting better. You're no longer acting as if you're less. And this is where many people sabotage themselves. They retreated. They dilute themselves. They laugh at jokes that don't work anymore. To avoid drawing too much attention, agree with hollow opinions. But change does not occur in silence. It echoes. And if those around you don't know how to deal with the echo, it's not your problem to solve. And let's be honest, how long are you going to dim your light in order to be digestible to people who aren't even good for your spirit? You see, change necessitates some level of emotional risk. It entails being willing to let go of things, people, places, and patterns that are no longer in line with your evolving self. And that sounds poetic until you're in the midst of it, mourning the familiar while creating the unknown. But that is how you know it's real. Real change costs money, not in a destructive way, but in a refining way. It takes away the noise, the neediness, and the performative you, leaving you clearer, quieter, and more grounded than you've ever been. You stop living on edge, waiting for approval as if it were oxygen. You stop negotiating your worth as if it were on clearance. And gradually, you come to trust yourself, not because you read it in a book or saw it on a quote, but because you earned it through thousands of small decisions in which you chose truth over comfort. And when that shift occurs, even slightly, you're no longer the same. Not louder, not harder, but less susceptible to nonsense. And that's when life begins to move differently around you, because you're finally changing within yourself. The funny thing is, once you stop being so open to other people's opinions, drama, and endless expectations, you'll notice how much quieter your inner world becomes. Not silent in a boring way, but quiet in a peaceful manner. The kind of silence that allows you to finally hear your own thoughts. You begin to notice that the things you used to react to instantly now simply pass by. It is not numbness, it is clarity. Someone talks over you during a conversation. You do not need to reclaim the spotlight. Someone gives you a passive-aggressive tone. You do not need to solve it, like an ancient riddle. You simply observe it, file it under, "Not my problem," and continue on with your life. And that's where the real change occurs. Not when you force yourself to be unconcerned, but when your nervous system truly stops being activated by each gust of wind. Because caring excessively is exhausting. Not only mentally, but physically. Your body holds onto every micro-stress as if it were preparing for battle. Your shoulders tighten, your jaw clenches, and your sleep becomes shallow. All because someone you don't even like you might be irritated with you for declining an offer you didn't want to accept. Meanwhile, life is happening, time is passing, and you're wasting valuable energy trying to manage impressions rather than establishing alignment. However, when you finally break free from that cycle and begin to live according to your internal compass, rather than external chaos, your entire rhythm shifts. You say yes slowly, no quickly, pause before responding, and speak less. But when you do, your words have weight. Not because you want to be mysterious, but because silence no longer feels uncomfortable. You aren't talking to fill space, you're living in it. And as you develop this inner space, you'll notice that most people are looking for certainty rather than control. And when they can't find it in themselves, they look to you. That is why they push, guilt, pressure, or attempt to test you. However, once you stop playing their game, they either learn to treat you differently or leave the arena entirely. And let them. Not everyone is meant to be with you through every stage of your life. Some people were only compatible with the version of you who couldn't say no, always apologized first, and required approval to feel safe. But you've already updated the operating system. Now you have better boundaries, a clearer vision, and finally, peace that does not require permission. Peace like that changes everything. Here's the twist that most people don't see coming. When you stop bending yourself to fit into spaces you've outgrown, the world does not collapse. In fact, it begins to restructure itself around your new standards. It is wild. You begin to see people reveal who they truly are, rather than the version they presented when you were always agreeable and available. Some take a step back, surprised that they can no longer use a sigh to guilt trip you. Others become louder and more demanding, like a child pushing a boundary. Only a few people adjust and grow alongside you. Those are the people who belong. You begin to realize that finding peace does not require doing more, but rather doing less of what drains you. You no longer feel bad about leaving a message on read when your energy is low. You are not in a hurry to explain yourself every time you choose yourself. That mental loop of, "What will they think?" becomes quieter. Until one day, it is gone. You walk into a room and don't scan for approval. You're looking for alignment, truth, and energy that feels right, not just familiar. You no longer seek closure. You do not over-explain. You understand that people will misunderstand you based on their current level of functioning, and that is fine. Let them. You have better things to do, like actually living. For example, instead of checking your phone first thing in the morning, turn on a soft light. Like making a cup of tea and allowing your thoughts to be messy without attempting to fix them. Saying, "I don't know," and feeling no shame about it. For example, deleting apps, muting chaos, and walking barefoot simply because it feels authentic. You realize that presence is the true currency. Nothing external ever truly changes. Until you change. Your lens. Your posture. Your standards. When you finally stop relying on the reactions of others to determine your self-worth, you will no longer be in emotional debt. It is liberating. You are allowed to laugh without permission. You can be still without feeling guilty. You can disagree without becoming defensive. You stop asking, "Is this okay?" and start saying, This is me. Surprisingly, the less you do for the world, the more it respects you. People sense it. The shift. The unbothered energy. Confidence without the need to shout. The detachment that is not cold, but rather self-possessed. It's like becoming a mountain. You are not affected by every wind. You are not reacting to every echo. You're not desperate to be seen because you've finally recognized yourself. And that, right there, is the power you cannot lose. Let us keep going. You start to notice something strange. You used to be obsessed with progress, chasing it like a dog after cars. Faster, better, and more. However, instead of sprinting through life, attempting to fix everything, you begin to observe. You realize how much of what you used to call growth was actually frantic movement to avoid stillness. Stillness used to feel like stagnation. It now feels like clarity. Because in that stillness, you can hear things you used to ignore. Your gut instinct. You have quiet preferences. The voice that says no without guilt. And it is in that space that something subtle, yet profound, begins to change. You stop managing other people's perceptions and instead manage your own peace. When necessary, you allow the uncomfortable silence to continue. You allow things to be awkward rather than covering up other people's discomfort at your own expense. You leave conversations that don't feel honest, not out of arrogance, but because you don't want to participate in things that require you to give up on yourself. And the best part is that nothing burns down. In fact, life begins to feel less like a game you're playing and more like a garden you're finally learning to care for. You realize that your energy is not infinite, but rather sacred, and you begin to spend it as if it were valuable. You protect your mornings. You refuse draining obligations without offering a 5-paragraph essay of excuses. You leave the party early without having to be the last to laugh. You no longer chase people, not because you are cold, but because you have realized that someone who wants to stay will never force you to run after them. Even in a conflict, you do not fight to be understood. You speak your truth and let go. You're no longer auditioning for approval. And when people try to coerce you back into your old roles as the pleaser, fixer, and over-explainer, you smile but don't return to character. That older version of yourself was performing for an audience. This new version is simply being. There's no script, no performance. There's no filter. Surprisingly, this version of you has more power, not less. Increased presence. More pull. People lean in. They pay better attention. Why? Because when you are no longer desperate to be liked, people begin to genuinely like you. You become magnetic not because you try, but because you are grounded, centered, and solid. And when people ask how you did it, how you became so calm, unwavering, and you simply shrug and say, I've stopped trying to be everything for everyone. And maybe that's when life began to respond to you. If this strikes a chord with you, let it stay. If you want more of this type of content, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.